Okay, everyone, let's grab our seats. It's almost 8:30. It's 8:29. My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home, everyone. A couple quick announcements. As you know, there's a Memorial Day picnic tomorrow. It's called the Annual Recovery Picnic. It will take place at Peace Valley Park from 12 noon to till 4 or 4:30. It's absolutely free, ton of food. It's potluck. If you got something, bring it, donate it to it. If not, if you can't afford it, come out and eat it. That's what it's about. It's like an AA family reunion. It's every year, Peace Valley Park. It's kind of cool. We also have ongoing commitments. We need people every Sunday night. There's no requirements, just a willingness to be of service and share a little bit of your own story with people that are in treatment. You know how important that is if you've ever been in treatment, when people from the outside come out and share a message of hope and recovery. And sometimes maybe what missteps you took that you realize now can be more helpful to somebody that's in treatment with that. And I think you guys already know this group's all about service. So if you ever want to get involved in any service, we got tons of it. We donate books to treatment centers. In the last 3 years or 4 years, we've given away something like 1,100 books or something. And it's all because of your support and everything that you guys do behind the scenes. So if you can't physically do the commitments, you can help support the group. The food, thanks Dom for the pizzas, they're amazing. I owe 30% of my body weight to Dom. I used to blame my wife, but anyway, yeah. And the cheese dogs back there, and Howard doing a great job, and world's greatest coffee maker. Now with that, I guess I got to introduce the world's greatest chairperson. Let's give a warm welcome to Brian.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. That's 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock every week, and our speaker comes on at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30. Please feel free to come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God Reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others can benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. So if there's anyone that's new at this meeting for the first time or visiting from out of town that would like to introduce themselves, please introduce yourself on a first name basis. Yeah?
Hey, I'm June. I'm an alcoholic.
June. Welcome. Yeah?
Chris, I'm in recovery.
Chris. Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm Ian. I'm an alcoholic.
Ian, welcome. Anybody else? We get everybody? The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and who is willing to sponsor, please raise their hands. So we got a lot of people willing to sponsor. If you are new, hang out with us after the meeting. We'd love to talk with you. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Anybody have anything going on outside the picnic Ron mentioned? No? Nothing? A couple quick announcements from this group. This group has a sister group, which is a big book study meeting. It meets every Thursday at 7:30 right up the road here. That's at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street in Doylestown, PA. And the coffee for that meeting's on at 6:15, so again, feel free to come early and join us if you want to engage in some fellowship, enjoy the coffee, refreshments we put out. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put their donations in that jar on the back table marked Big Book and CD Donations. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got a YouTube channel. We put all the speakers from this meeting on there, so if you hear a message that you think is good here, that you would think somebody else could benefit from, you can share with them there. You can find other speakers that you might enjoy. We also have a Facebook page. We post any happenings we have going on, upcoming speakers, events, workshops we might have, as well as other groups will post things they have going on. So it's a good resource to have to stay tied in with happenings and AA throughout this area. And with that, We're going to bring Thomas up here. Thomas is going to read our Just for Today prayer of recovery.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome home. My name's Thomas, and I'm an alcoholic. This is the Just for Today prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And with that, let's give a warm welcome to Murph with the preamble.
Hey guys, Murph, alcoholic. Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve a common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organizations, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I'm going to have Kara come on up and read the 12 steps of recovery.
Good evening, y'all. My name's Kara, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home. The AA 12 steps of recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to prove our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Now I'm going to ask Brian to come up so he can introduce our speaker.
Okay, this group does have a 7th tradition. Every A group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'll see that the basket makes its way around. There are no dues or fees for A membership, but we do have expenses, and your contributions do help us to cover the cost of food, rent, big books, workshop CDs, and the likes. We also have a Venmo for the group if you want to talk to the young man sitting over there in the yellow. He has a Venmo that you can use if you don't have cash on you and you'd prefer to contribute that way. We're taking Bitcoin now, so whatever you got. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker for tonight. We had a different speaker planned tonight. If you saw the flyer that was going around, we had a speaker that was going to come in from New York. He had a family emergency earlier today, so our speaker tonight was nice enough to step in on short notice. But with that, I would like to introduce to you a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group on loan to us from the Flowertown Group. Please help me welcome Patrick.
Good evening. I am an alcoholic and my problem is Patrick. And I picked that up from a gentleman I knew in New York who used to introduce himself that way. And what he did was he encouraged me to understand that alcohol was only a symptom, that my problems started before and continue afterwards if I don't do what I'm supposed to on a daily basis. So it's been a long time since I spoke in this kind of an environment, so if you'll pardon me. We all know our story, right? So it's not something I planned for, and microphone's a little bit unnerving to me, but I was born into a family that was full of alcoholics. And my story starts there. I was born in a town which, if you own a first edition of the Big Book, is where that book was first printed, Cornwall, New York. So the Cornwall Press was where they printed the original Big Book, and I had some friends when I got in early sobriety who had some of the original galleys that they used at the press there, which was pretty cool. And it was interesting to see the blue lines and the markups that they did on it as they were changing and editing as they went along in the process of it. So the town that I actually lived in was a place called Washingtonville, New York. In Washingtonville, right, it sounds funny, right? You know it? You lived in New Paltz, so you know where Washingtonville is. Washingtonville is a little tiny place. When I left there in 1982, there was 1,800 people there. There was probably about 6,000 dairy cows. We had 5 churches, 4 bars, 3 banks, and just not a lot else to do, right? So my grandmother owned one of those bars, so as a young child, running around in diapers in a bar was kind of normal for me. So alcohol had always been in my life. It's the smell of alcohol, cigarettes, spilled beer on a wooden floor. Those are my earliest memories, standing next to my grandmother as she was washing the glasses behind the bar. And I'm as tall as the dishwashing thing, and she's going, shoom, 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 she's cleaning the glasses out. I still remember that, So it's not a surprise that I grew up to drink the way that I did, and the way that so many of my brothers and sisters. Now, I'm the youngest of 8. I have 5 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment there in Washingtonville. That was about 800 square feet, because I didn't realize it then, but we were poor. And I had a friend of mine who grew up in South Los Angeles who pointed that out to me when I made a comment. We were having lunch in downtown Los Angeles, and I saw a cockroach on the trash can. And I mentioned that my brother used to like to try to bring my ego down by reminding me that we used to flick dead cockroaches at each other playing war when I was 4 years old. And Reggie looks at me and he says, I thought I was poor. And I grew up this side of Compton. And he said, man, you were poor. And I said, well, I didn't know any different, right? Do we know any different? We just know that we have a family. So when I arrived, though, there was nothing more useless than another mouth to feed in the house, right? So there was resentment, and it was kind of a mad scramble for resources, is probably what I would call it. And I love my brothers and sisters, but it was a harsh environment. It really was. I had a conversation with my one brother, Lenny, and we talk about the way in which alcohol ruins a person's life or their approach to life. And I remember standing in a playpen, and the front door of the apartment was right in front of me, and my brother Lenny was about 9 years older than me. My father over him, closed fist beating him. And, it's just a vision of that, and the noise and the cacophony that goes around that. And I was talking with that brother not long ago, and he says, yeah, we used to watch out the front windows to see if Dad was coming home, and they would put him in the closet where we kept all the clothes for laundry, and they would hide him under the laundry until Dad passed out, and then he could come out and he was safe. He got it worse than any of us. It was just, oof. So I tried to avoid drinking because it was, I had so many examples of what it does, right? My dad drank. My dad had 3 beers with his 2 cups of coffee in the morning when he woke up. That was his way to get the shakes off. And, that seemed normal to me, right? Doesn't everybody have 2 or 3 Rhinegold's with their coffee in the morning? And the things that we grow into being normal, right? So things were going along pretty well. I have 5 older brothers, as I said, and we're all very competitive. And they could all run faster, they could throw harder, they could wrestle me into the ground. There was nothing I could do better than them. So what I did was I realized that I could memorize stuff better than they could. And that was, there's some water here. And that was something I became very good at. I taught myself little mnemonic tricks. And I developed, what I learned was a semi-eidetic memory. And so the one thing I could do was I could spell things and I could remember stuff, and I did really good in school. To the point where I was kind of like a young Sheldon, right? So, which, with all of the social skills of a young Sheldon, which was not good. Now, one of the side effects of growing up in the bar was I was taught by the residents of the bar jokes that were not necessarily good for a 4 or 5-year-old to know. And so I would go to kindergarten and I would repeat these jokes, which were hilarious to them, right, when it comes out of a 4 or 5-year-old kid's mouth. But Mrs. Blivens didn't really appreciate that so much, so I got to spend quite a bit of time in the principal's office until I learned what was appropriate in normal company. So there was a lot of that in my life until I got sober. I didn't know what was appropriate. It was just, it was a rough and ready upbringing, and that's probably the best I could. There was a lot of happiness there, and there was a lot of dire straits there, and the question was I going to be able to filter that properly? And I'll talk a little bit about that journey, because that's what really got me into AA. So in 5th grade, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer, and they removed one of her lungs, part of the other, and I was 10, my brother was 12, and the next brother up was 15, and she needed to heal. So they shipped us off to various points across the country. My brother Richard, who was closest to me and who fought most with me, was sent to California, and I was put on a plane and sent to Germany, where my brother was in the army, in Ansbach. And so when I arrived there, I was just a couple weeks after my 11th birthday. And to celebrate my arrival, he pulled out a bottle of Jim Beam, a bunch of rocks glasses, and he served me up a double shot. And I knocked it back. And I had learned that you don't breathe in while you're trying to drink. So I didn't come up sputtering, and I took it so well, he served me another one. And then I had a bottle of Hofbrau beer and a full spaghetti and meatballs and sausage dinner. And nothing happened, other than that I had a blast. I had so much fun. I suddenly felt like I fit in. I could hold my own in a conversation. Everything was good. I didn't get sick. I should have gotten really sick. I was 11. If you look at an 11-year-old kid, right, and it took me till I was an adult in sobriety, and I'm looking at an 11-year-old kid and I'm going, why was I drinking whiskey at 11 years old? That's insane. And I joke about it, right? I put it off as long as I could. It's because there was a lot going on inside this head, right? There was just a ton going on. I was bored to tears at school. And they didn't have a gifted and accelerated program. I had a misadventure in 1st grade where I left the school. Now this is a rural area, right? So this is woods. And I walked almost 4 miles to my brother's house. From recess, I left, walked these country roads to my brother's house, and then made it halfway back before they found me. Now they had shut the school, and the police and the fire department were all looking and everything like that. And at that point, Mr. Dunn, who was the principal, decided to introduce me to the school psychologist. And that's when they gave me a whole bunch of tests. And they found out that in first grade, I probably should have been in fourth grade. But my mother would not let them do that because she wanted me to be with my peers, not knowing that none of them cared for me because I was a know-it-all. And I didn't mind showing off that I was a know-it-all, which makes you very unpopular, when you're around your friends. So that turned into massive boredom later on in life when I got to high school. So I get back from Germany. My mother has found religion. So she got back to the family church, the Presbyterian church in Washingtonville, New York, and we were going to heal her through faith. And of course we didn't. She passed away when I was 12. And, she had me going through the whole thing. I got baptized. And that was a funny story, too, because I was rushed. When you have that many people, you only have one bathroom, you only have so much time to get ready. And I washed my hair, but I didn't quite get all of the shampoo out. And so when Pastor Poole put the water on my hair, it started sudsing up. And it's like, and my parents were so religious before that, right, that 5 of us got baptized at the same time, right? So it was like, whew. So very, very fun. But that church was wonderful. It was instrumental in my actually kind of not going insane at the time. But I was drinking. And I was drinking as often as I could. So I would find a way to catch it, borrow it, get somebody to buy it for me, whatever. And it didn't matter what form it was in. So my mother died when I was 12. And my father then took the life insurance money, because she was 43 when she died. So to give you an idea as to the kind of the approach to life that the Osborne family had, was my mother's dying wish was to be cremated, taken up in a small plane over Washingtonville and dumped out of that plane. And her reasoning for that was there were SOBs down there she wanted to get in their eyes. That's not the funny part. The funny part is my father and her brother did it. Right? Once the weather got cleared up. Crazy, right? So, but she was also a practical joker, so I have a little different perspective on that now. But I always say that I came from a family of professional resenters, right? That we knew how to hold a grudge and nurse it and keep it going. And it's like, ooh, you crossed me, and I'm going to make sure. It might take me 10 years, but I'm going to get back to you. And that's a terrible way to live, right? So my mother died. 3 of my brothers were still home with us at the time with my father, and my father was non-functional. It was like I was calling him in drunk to work, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. I would call him in and let his boss know that he was going to make it to the factory. We, right around, probably about 2 months before I turned 15, we had a dog, and he came up lame, and he was sick. And so what we had to do was, I had to put him down, right? And my father couldn't make it. He just couldn't make it. So I got a friend of mine to take me and the dog over, and we had him put down. And it was that kind of stuff that I was doing as a teenager, which, hey, there's an adult here somewhere, right? No. So I hung out with a gentleman named Marty, who was a good friend of mine. And he lived like 3 doors down. And we watched PBS, we listened to Dr. Demento, we played card games and Risk and all of that kind of thing. And he was he was a science guy. He was like 10 years older than me. And what I didn't realize was my father thought I was gay and that we had a relationship, and I didn't. Marty wasn't gay either, We just happened to be intellectually inclined, which is the same thing in my father's mind. The fact that you might read a book more than once, like The Lord of the Rings, might be a sign right there. But I have to give my dad leeway, right? Because he was born in 1928, and I was born in 66. We had not much in common, And he was born in Queens. He was the oldest of 6. He was, they would go up and they would work as migrant farmers on the orchards up and down the Hudson Valley, and they would take the fruit down to the city and sell it on the street corner in the Depression. This was his childhood, right? So it's, I have to give him some benefit of the doubt. He quit school at 10th grade because he had to go to work and take care of his family because his father left him. So these are perspectives that I got in AA. Originally, I was angry with him. I was angry. And so right around 15, I'm over at Marty's house. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. He just closed the bars with my oldest brother. Marty's phone rings. Hey, get home. And I'm loaded. And so I get home, and he mumbled something I can barely remember, and that was the last time he laid hands on me. So, and my oldest brother was there to make sure that I didn't fight back. That's the way it worked in our house. You take the beating from the oldest to the youngest. It rolls downhill. So my father got up the next morning, and he was complaining that he might have broken one of his knuckles. I have a hard head. And as soon as he went to work, I packed some things and I left. And I went and stayed with some friends, and I couch surfed most of the next year. And so I was staying with that same friend, Marty, let me go back. My father ran out of money when he was trying to drink himself to death. He ran out of cash. So he decided that he needed to solve his financial problems. And what better way than to burn the house down so you can collect the insurance money? Because that's what you do, right? So I was the resident Google in the house. And so what I did was I helped plan it. And I planned it in such a way that we wouldn't get caught. So we didn't get caught. My brother executed it, and he did a poor job of it. So only half the house burned down, but it was a total loss. And then I, stone cold, 15-year-old me, walked through that house with the insurance adjuster and just lied. My father got a nice check for about $28,000, which in 1982 was not a bad number. And he proceeded to do as much drinking as he possibly could. Never rebuilt the house. And it didn't matter to me because I was never going to live under his roof again. I didn't want to. So in January of that year, I'd been staying at my one sister's house, which was about 4 or 5 miles from that house. And I was staying there. And I was 15 and I was voluble. I was annoying. I had a short temper. I was grouchy, I guess. And we got into an argument, and on a snowy night, I put on a second pair of trousers and, a couple, 3 shirts and a heavy overcoat, and I walked over to Marty's house, and I stayed with him for the next 3 months. And so staying with him, I could have picked better because he had no heater running water. And if you were around in January of 1982, it was one of the coldest winters on record. So I got to, what you do is, life hack number 1, if you are living in a place where it's below 0 and you have water and you don't want it to freeze, put it in the refrigerator. It won't freeze, right? And then I would take that out, I would heat it up in the kettle, I'd brush my teeth, I'd wash my hair, and I'd go to school and act like nothing was wrong. And except we didn't have money and we didn't have food. And a kind gentleman at the high school set me up with a free lunch program, which was horrible for your ego. And I worked a little bit on a dairy farm up there in New York, and so I learned how to milk cows, I pitched hay. And then I realized that after my mother died, my father was getting a death benefit for my mother in my name, like $200 a month. So I went to the guidance counselor and I went to the social worker, and I said, well, that's not his money, that's my money, I don't live with him. And the first time my dad had to write a check to me for $200 was when he reached out and he decided it was time to sign me over to the state of New York. And so we're in that meeting talking about whether or not I'm going to become a ward of the state, as it were, in a group home. And my poor sister in California volunteered to take me out with her and her husband. And I punished them for the next 3 years for doing that. It was not an easy adjustment for me, because I've been making my own rules for over a year. You know, now I gotta live in here, you got rules? Rules? What are rules? And you know, they were wonderful people, and they opened their house to me, and I did not make it easy for them. So, let's fast forward. I managed to graduate high school. It took me 5.5 years. My son and I were going through my stuff a few years ago. We found my high school transcript. And he looks at it and he says, "How did you manage to miss 83 days of your freshman year in high school?" I said, "Well, it took a little effort. Not all of it was just absences. Most of it was skipping school. A good portion of it was suspensions. But I also managed to get a 0.67 GPA out of a 4 that year. So it took me 5.5 years to get out of high school. Now, I moved to California, a place called Upland, with my sister and her husband, and then to Anaheim, which is where the Angels are in Disneyland. And I drank all while I was there. So I finished out high school, somehow wound up in a 4-year college. And I was at a little liberal arts college called the University of Laverne. No Shirley involved. And I was studying English literature and theater arts, and it's a great, those are 2 great programs to study when you're drunk. Right? Lots of drunks in the literature trade. So I managed to get myself put out for a semester to England, and I went to Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, and that's where I drank my way out of college. Fun times. Came back to New York, stayed in a place called Walden, which right now it didn't exist then, but it's the home of Angry Orchard, if you know the Angry Orchard cider, hard cider. And then I went back out to California and I got a job as a graphic artist in the movie industry. So little shop on non-union, and it was there that I hit my bottom. And my bottom was really an emotional bottom. It wasn't really an alcohol bottom. What happened was I had a dream, and dreams figured very, very strongly in my early sobriety. I had a dream, and it was a suppressed memory of a night with my father. So my father worked rotating shifts, so he worked 3 weeks in a row, 7 days a week. So he'd work 4 to 12, he'd work 12 to 8, he'd work 8 to 4, and then he'd have a week off. One night he comes home, so he's on the 8 to 4 shift, but he comes home at about 8 o'clock at night, which means he's had 4 hours worth of drinking in him by the time he got home. And it's a snowy night, he pulls down into the driveway, and we're out in the woods. And the car stays on, and he doesn't get out of the car. And I'm kind of looking, what's going on there? So I go out and I open the door. He had a beautiful 1974 Pinto, bashed inside, drunk's car. And I open it up, and he's literally aspirating to death on his own vomit in the car. And so I pound that out of him, got him breathing, got him inside. And he proceeded to give me one of the more thorough whippings that I'd ever had, because he had no idea that he was choking to death. All he knew was I was hitting him, and that was the one thing that he didn't do. I have to say that he wasn't always like that, but he was only like that when he was super drunk. And he was mildly drunk most of the time. He was super drunk on occasion. So he wasn't like that every day. Most of the time we could find peace. But, so I had this memory, and I was totally raw. And a gentleman named Thor, can't make this up, my buddy, he was a drinking buddy of mine from college, his name is Thor, and he's still sober. I reached out to him, and I didn't realize that he had gotten sober. He moved out to Desert Hot Springs, out by Palm Springs in California. And I called him up and I told him about this dream. And he had hooked up with these people who were doing, this was in vogue in 1990, 91, it was inner child work. So you go in and you have like a week-long therapy extravaganza, is probably what I would call it. But you get in touch with that stuff that happened and find a way to deal with it, right? So it was called Corkill, and it was run by a woman named Ann Hardy and her husband, Sam. And so I went for the 1 week thing, and it kind of opened me up. Because I was very locked down, I couldn't have an emotion. I like to say I walked through life with a clenched fist, and I didn't really strike out at people, I just didn't want you in. It was a good border. You're not gonna know who I am. So that unlocked me, and what happened was I didn't know if I was an alcoholic or if I was a drug addict or if I was just an Al-Anon or a codependent. All of this stuff was swirling around me. And my father got very ill. He had a thing called bleeding varices. Now, he'd been diagnosed with throat cancer before that. So my feeling is that was his last drink, right? So he had bleeding varices. I had to get on a plane, fly to New York. And we were worried he was going to die. So we were all trying to make peace with that. And all of my brothers and sisters were staying at my sister's house, and they were all under my skin because I was raw, right? I had no emotional shields whatsoever left. So one night I got out of the house because it was just them. And I looked at the sky, and I'd heard about this third step through the Codependence Anonymous program. And I looked up at the sky and I said, okay, God, do whatever you need to do to make me do this work. Nothing happened yet, till I got off the plane in Los Angeles and I went into work the following Monday. And the following Monday I was let go. And I was laid off in such a way that I could get unemployment. And I reached out to Thor and I said, I think I need to do more of this stuff. And he said, well, we got a room open here at the house in Desert Hot Springs. You can come and stay here. It only costs $200 a month. Oh, okay, that's 1/4 of my unemployment. I can do that. And so I got out there and I was surrounded by these people who were part of that program, but they were all in recovery. And that was the key. They were all in recovery. And I defined myself by what I was doing at the time, right? So I was human doing, and I wasn't doing anything. So I was worthless, right? And I met up with Sam, and Sam was 30 years sober at the time. Amazing guy. Excuse me. And he says, so what do you want? And I said, well, I want what you have. And he says, well, it took me 30 years to get it. He says, the problem with you, Patrick, is that you don't know what you are. You don't know what you want to be. You don't know who you are. You have this idea of what you think you should be, but you have no concept of how to get there. And the problem is that you don't know what's wrong. He says, so what I want you to do, and he handed me a 12 and 12. And he says, what I want you to do is read this, and wherever you see the word alcohol, just replace it with life. And then pray every morning and night to find out what you are. And within 2 weeks, I had a dream where I literally told myself in the dream, split in two, body split in two, it was a drunk dream, Patrick, you're an alcoholic. And that was my first step. So, but I wasn't convinced, right? So I come out into the kitchen and I'm telling Thor, my buddy from college, about this dream. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I just wish I could get a clear sign. And he's like, well, what do you want, skywriting? It doesn't get much clearer than that. He says, if you catch the sun bus at 10 o'clock, you'll make the noon brown bag attitude adjustment meeting in Palm Springs on Tockwitz Canyon, and just raise your hand, say you're an alcoholic, and shut up. And that's what I did. And that was my first AA meeting. So the cool thing about Palm Springs was their tradition was, unless you were at a beginner's meeting, if you didn't have more than 90 days, you didn't share at a meeting. You could say your name, that you were an alcoholic, and they would go around, but they all knew how to drink, was their thought process. We already know how to drink, we already know how to use, we already know how to behave badly. We don't need to hear more of that, because right now, Patrick, all you got is a drunk-a-log. we want to talk about sobriety and recovery and step work. And so they made me listen to the point where I was able to actually hear. And that was really important for me. So, Sam, I selected him, I sentenced him to be my first sponsor. Now, Sam has a tremendous story. Sam got sober in prison in the early 60s, and he had been a hitman. As I learned more about his journey to sobriety and his time in sobriety, he spent running a thing called Turnoff with Ann, where they would pick up these kids off the streets in Venice, California, and give them a place to sleep, give them security, safety. If they needed treatment, they got that. If they needed psychological therapy, they would hook them up with that. And they did that for 30 years. So by the time I got along, they were pretty well practiced at that. And and Sam just said, basically, look, I will walk you through these steps. And you hear lots of different things about sponsorship. You have the group of guys, and they all go over and take over a diner, and the poor waitress is wondering if she's going to get enough tip or anything like that. And Sam was not that way. Sam was like, look, I will walk you through the steps, but I'm not driving you to meetings. I am not here to be your friend. We are here to work steps. The society of AA is where you get your fellowship. And that is by you becoming friends with people in the program and building that group. Because he was moving to Hawaii in 6 months. He wasn't taking me, right? So he and Ann were moving to Hawaii, and they didn't have room in the suitcase for Patrick. So he's like, look, I got to get you at least through step 8. And then, I have some idea as to whether or not you're going to be able to find someone else and work you through the rest of it. Right? And you're going to do a terrible job the first time anyway. So his pace for me was 1 a week, which I thought was interesting. He's like, look, that dream counts as 1, that's good. What's your idea of a higher power? And he says, just come up with something. It doesn't matter what. I said, really, I don't have to pick a team? I don't have to memorize verses from a book of 2,000-year-old Middle Eastern fairy tales? And he's like, stop picking on that carpenter son. Because he had been a Seventh-day Adventist at one point in his sobriety. And he says, it's going to change. Just get something. And be open to whatever change comes along. And that's all I needed, right? So I had studied a lot of mythology and multiple religions, Joseph Campbell. If you ever get a chance to see Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth with Bill Moyers, it's an eye-opening, earth-shattering experience, 13 hours of amazing discussion of spirituality in all of its forms all across the world. It was eye-opening to me. And so the second step, I got that done. He's like, third step, really all you have to do is get enough emotion behind it. When you say that third step prayer, it'll stick. And I said, well, I hear about all these people that they say they take their will back. He says, yeah, how comfortable are they? I said, not very. He says, they think they're taking their will back. They're just struggling in their chains. Like, wow, really? He says, if you really want to get uncomfortable, try going against what your belief is. Try going back on the promise of turning your will and your life over to the care of God. See how that works for you. I was like, okay, makes sense. Now, step 4 was difficult because I was a victim, right? You've heard some of the story. I was a victim. I'm an Al-Anon, man. Dad was the bad dude. So say I'm sitting there with Thor. We're both working on a 4th step at the same time. Thor looks at me and he says, look, why don't you write my inventory and I'll write yours? It'll be a lot easier. And I said, well, we've known each other long enough, but I don't know if that would work, And I called Sam up and I said, look, I'm having difficulty with this one. And he says, well, why don't you write down a list of all the things you hate most about your father? And then come see me next week. And it took me like 5 minutes, right? I've got all these character defects listed out, nice title on there, Dad's character defect list. And I got to Sam's house, and he says, "That's a nice title." He says, "Why don't you cross it out and put Pat's character defect list, and welcome to step 5. And he asked me to elaborate on what these character defects and traits were by stories from my own life. And he gave me really colorful commentary. So, chicken S, baby cakes, SBS, self-bull, right? And he encouraged me to look at the fact that I had acquired those terrible things that I hated most about my father as defense mechanisms. And then until I realized what they were and started working on them in AA, I was going to continue to do them no matter what. He says, "Patrick, you're either going to deal with this stuff or it's going to deal with you." And that's really the way that we approached it. And he gave me some worksheets for step 6 and 7. And then we got to step 8. And step 8, I had a long list. One of the few I know who had an insurance company on their amends list. And I'm like, how do I do this? Right? Because my father and my brother were both still alive when I got sober. And the statute of limitations had not run out. So Sam pointed out to me that I can't, for my own purpose of making amends, cause them to go to jail. So I had to find a creative way in which to repay the insurance industry in a whole when I had the opportunity. And I did later on. So I got sober. I went back to New York, and I actually walked into a Friday night group, and it was a newcomers meeting in St. Anne's Church on Route 94. And one of the last guys that I drank with in Washingtonville, New York, was there at the meeting. So Robbie and I are still in touch. But we were underage drinkers at a bar, waiting for 7 kegs to chill for a high school graduation party in 1982, and that was the last drink I had in Washingtonville, New York. So had to get sober, had to really work on it, and sobriety gave me a lot of things, right? So I'd worked kind of alongside the movie industry as a graphic artist. And I figured I'd blown that whole opportunity. It was just done. And my father passed away. And we said goodbye to him, and we did so in a healthy way, which was shocking to me, right? So all my brothers and sisters were there. They got to say goodbye to him in January of 1993. I moved back to California in that fall, and by that December, I was working at a movie studio. How does that happen? And I just celebrated 2 years when I got there. And it's a cool movie studio. It's a place where the Munchkins ran around back in the 30s. And they had an AA meeting there, which was cool. It's the old MGM lot, right? They had an AA meeting there. It was called the Yellow Brick Road to Happy Destiny. And I would go to this meeting, and nobody in the talent community or the executive community would go there. It was me, an electrician, because I was the guy in a print shop, an electrician, and a plumber. And we'd sit there and we'd have lunch and we'd talk AA. And it was great. It was fantastic, right? Sober. I got married sober. I got married to a girl who knew me when I was drinking. And we had a daughter. And 28 years ago, on May 17th, we were expecting our second child. And I say this because when we get sober, right, I'm very fortunate. My sobriety date is November 3rd, 1991. I have not had to have a drink since then. But life continues to happen. So we were expecting to go after Mother's Day of that year in 1997 to find out the sex of our second child. And what we found out was that child was not going to be born alive. What we found out was that she was not going to be able to hold on to him. He was perfect in every way. He was just not cooked enough. It's a rough way to say it, isn't it? But his lungs hadn't developed. And so he was born at 21 weeks gestation, and his name is Jonathan, and we buried him in Glendale, California. And that was a rough day. Yeah. Service in AA saved me. So being of service in AA, when my dad died, the day my dad died, I had a coffee commitment that night at my home group. So I made coffee that night. And the day that we buried Jonathan, I had a coffee commitment with my home group. And I went to my home group, and I got another day sober because I had that commitment. Now, my wife was in the care of all of her family, so she was well taken care of, and I took some time to go to my AA family, and you people kept me sober. So that was a rough time. We got to move to Seattle. In 1999, we were there for about a year and a half. And that's where we got our third child, and my youngest, Sean. And Sean is 25 now, and he's a music composer, and he's a little bit on the spectrum. He composes classical music. And just, he was taking AP Calculus in high school. He's like, how's it going? He says, it's boring. I said, you're wrong, dude. That's just so wrong. But my approach to raising my kids was, I raised my kids not as I wished I had been raised, but in a way I wished my parents had been raised, to break that cycle. And so I have a grandson now, but he's 15 months old, and my daughter sends me this video of him, and he's going to climb up on this thing, and she says, are you going to sit on that, or are you going to climb on it? And he starts climbing, and she's like, we talked about this. And I'm like, oh, we really did break the cycle. Because that was a backhand moment for a child like me and my family. It was, even at 1 year old, you got slapped, And she doesn't have to do that because she was never shown it. I never hit my kids. And I got creative in how there was always a consequence for things, and they're respectful, but they never had to be punished in the way that my father did, which is fantastic. So, moved back to LA in 2006. It's coming up on 19 years ago, June 7th of 2006. I'm driving into Los Angeles. I was working for a company called Canon. You might know of them, a copier company, and I was heading into a meeting in Los Angeles. And I decided to get off the freeway. And I had been running with this group of AA guys. It was a traveling men's group out of Upland, California. And I decided to get off the freeway. I was going to get gas and cigarettes. And as I was slowing down, I look up and a police chase is coming up the off-ramp the wrong way. And the guy they're chasing hits me head on with his Nissan Armada. And the next thing I know, I'm sliding backwards, watching the airbag go down. Now, there was only one thought that came through my mind as this is going down, and that was, so this is how it ends. I was 39. This is how it ends. And I leaned in, and I turned the wheel, and I hit the brakes. And the next thing there's powder in the airbag. I don't know if you guys know that. It's gritty. And so I wound up in the hospital for the next 79 days. So I'm in the car and I'm awake, right? After the accident, I'm awake. And I call my wife and we're talking. And I'm like, call my sponsor. Now she thought my sponsor was this guy named Bill who had moved to Texas, but I had a new sponsor named Phil who was local. But I was running with these 20 guys who were all, successful businessmen, sober for a long time, and this kind of thing. And it was like Petticoat Junction. They're all calling each other. And 3 of those guys beat her to the hospital. And even though I was in the hospital for 79 days, there were very few days where another alcoholic wasn't in my room, bringing me another message of hope. Don't give up. And they organized a meeting when I was in a rehab hospital where they would bring in a whole group of people once a week. It was like 30 people. Astonishing. And AA just surrounded me. And that year when it was my 15th year sober, I remember this, I wound up in the Valley Club. Now, while I was in the hospital, I hooked onto this movie called Cinderella Man. I don't know if you know the film. The director always has his brother in the films, right? So I'm at the Valley Club in Burbank, celebrating my anniversary with the traveling men's group on a Wednesday night. And who's there but one of the guys that was in that movie whose brother directed it. So I'm on crutches, and I catch him because he goes outside for a smoke break. And I'm like, you have to tell your brother how important this was, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I don't mean to, put down what your work was, but he was the director and wrote it. And he goes, yeah, my brother loves to hear those stories. I'm playing golf with him tomorrow. And I can't wait to tell him. And the coolest part of that wasn't that that film was there to inspire me to not give up, because that's really what that story is, but that I got to, even though I didn't meet the director, I got to say thank you. And all throughout my sobriety, when I look at it, the thing that I value most is my opportunities to show my gratitude to all you all for helping me to live a life I only saw on television when I was a kid. I was at the Exchange Views group in New York. I was working in Manhattan about 8 years ago. I worked for the Village Voice at the time, and they had an Exchange Views lunch meeting at there was a Baptist church on John Street. And who did I run into but a member of the second class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who was sober 52 years at the time. And I got to talk with him and express my gratitude for him, because I had wonderful memories of his music when I was a child. And he was a top 40 guy. You can ask me who he was afterwards. I won't break his anonymity. But these are the things that happen. They're like Forrest Gump moments. And all I have to do is stay on the will and stay on the way and do God's will. And I'm open to all of this. But when I start looking at my navel and I start thinking that I'm alone and that, nobody cares and God doesn't care and this, that, and the other, might as well just go buy myself a drink. We are not alone. The only thing I have to do is get up in the morning, remember that I'm grateful for this next day, and then act accordingly. And if I do that right, I got a chance of getting my head to the pillow tonight without a drink. I want to thank you, Ron, for inviting me up. I know I'm a surrogate speaker, and I hope somebody heard something that they found useful tonight. All I know is that I got another day sober because you guys invited me here. Thanks.
My name's Nick, I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home, everybody. Let's thank Patrick again, that was excellent. He made me laugh, he made me cry. It's not easy to get up here and share such intimacy with, intimate parts of your life on this scale, and the humility he showed here tonight, and what he did was just outstanding. So thank you, Patrick. And food and fellowship, as we always discuss, starts at 8 o'clock, so come early, come even earlier than that. We're here about 7:15, 7:30. If you want to make this your home group, we're more than welcome to have you. As I say in my one group, boom, you're in. But there's no requirements, just come. And we could use some help cleaning up. We put all the chairs away, put them on the racks. I think the chairs stay the tables back there. It's customary us to form a line. Our speakers come at their own time and expense, so we try to form a line here in the front and thank them on a personal level. And with that, we will circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Okay, a moment of silence. Our Father,